I'm Manon Bradley. I'm the Development Director of the Major Projects Association. And I always like to do an introduction for our Knowledge Hub Live events because many people don't know that the Knowledge Hub is part of the Major Projects Association. So if you don't know anything about the Major Projects Association, you think it might be for you, come and see me afterwards and I'll sell it to you. £8.5 grand, it's a bonus. We set up the Knowledge Hub about just over 2 years ago, wasn't it, Jonathan? Specifically to create a repository for all the data and information about major projects, delivery and initiation that existed not just within the Major Projects Association but elsewhere. And also to create a community of practice that went beyond our membership. And I have to say, due to Jonathan's hard work and creativity, he's managed to do that. We've got, over 1,000 items in the repository, data items, and a thriving community as evidenced by tonight's event. So the key differentiator between hub events and Major Projects Association events is that at association events, only members can come. So we are really keen to welcome lots of non-members to come along tonight because it does broaden our discussion. So welcome to you. A quick thanks to PMI, who I know have helped to put tonight together and to promote it and to bring in a lot of you tonight. So thank you to PMI. And a huge thank you to Bentley Systems, as ever, for hosting our Knowledge Hub Live events. You do us a great service. Thank you very much, Ian. So I'm going to ask Ian to do some housekeeping for us and then to hand over to Sarah Cameron from Pinsent Masons, who's chairing tonight's session. So thank you very much.
Brilliant.
Ian.
Thank you very much, Manon. So just a quick bit of housekeeping before we get into there. Firstly, obviously, welcome to the Digital Advancement Academy here in London. I was also asked very briefly to describe one of the things we were doing in the Academy here today, during today. So I run an organisation called Commit, which is partnered with the Major Projects Association and the Hub. It's all about innovations in construction. It was born out of the Egan report back in 1998 or so, and basically what it's doing is bringing innovative parties, contractors, major projects, owner-operators, academia together to try and do innovative things. And one of the projects we're working on today is trying to get us out of the issues we have with contracts. Contracts, as we know, massively complex, overly complicated, contradictory, and the centre of a lot of problems we have on our projects. And the whole basis of the project was to try and find a way of making them shorter, more intelligent, and automating them so you're just asking questions and it's giving you answers. And that was the first part of our things today. So we had the legal people in the room, we had the financial people in the room, we had the various organisations, from contractors, from owners, within the room to try and solve that problem. So as being members of the MPA, you can also attend these things and be a partner with us. Jonathan was during the day, and I think it was quite good. It was quite good fun. Yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed it. I learned a lot about contracting. So anyway, brilliant. I'll hand you back over to the rest of this evening. Brilliant. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Thanks, Manon. Thanks, Jonathan, very much for asking me this evening to chair this highly topical panel discussion that we've got. And it's highly topical because, of course, there's this growing appreciation of the huge potential economic and societal benefit that can be gained from greater access to data and how that enables effective use of artificial intelligence. And yet, sharing data in a fair, equitable and safe way remains one of the great global challenges yet to be sorted out. And that is across all sectors, not just the construction sector. And while the construction sector is embracing things like alliancing and other collaborative techniques, there's this appreciation that a great deal more can be done if insights from the vast amount of major project data can be accessed more easily, shared in a safe way. And so there are, of course, many ways that data can be shared, many data sharing models, but the one that has captured the imagination of a lot of people in the last year or so is this conversation around data trusts. What does that mean? Well, as a result of the pilots earlier this year run by the Open Data Institute, the definition that was agreed on for those purposes was that it is a legal structure that provides for the independent stewardship of data for an agreed purpose. So what that means is a legal framework that has the means to generate trust in the everyday sense of the word, to help unlock data in a safe and equitable environment. Pinsent Masons, the law firm I work for, is very well known to the construction industry. We've been at the heart of it for 50 years or more. But we were also delighted to be asked to advise on 2 of the 3 Open Data Institute's pilot data trusts earlier this year, which was a terrific experience for the team that worked on that. And what became abundantly clear from that exercise was the absolute criticality of effective engagement of stakeholders, because that is how you generate the necessary trust to move forward to find a way of sharing data in a safe and equitable way. And also, of course, you have to deal with it in a way whereby there is strong governance and transparency, because those generate trust, and you have to manage the competition issues, the commercial confidentiality issues, data protection, intellectual property, other contractual rights, and so on. But that's not meant to make it sound too complicated to achieve. On the contrary, if you get effective stakeholder engagement, then you can go on this journey to generate that trust. So how might this be applied to the construction sector? Well, here this evening we've got 3 panellists who are going to talk you through their aspirations, activities, and so on in this area and their ideas, and then we'll open it up to you here and those joining us remotely to ask questions, share experiences, ideas, and so on. So just to introduce them, we have got first over here we have Gareth Parks from Sir Robert McAlpine, who leads the Data Innovation and Digital Transformation Project. We have Martin Paver, founder and CEO of Projecting Success, and Stephen Naylor from the Health and Safety Executive, Senior Data Scientist. And we're going to ask them to talk to you for 5 or 6 minutes each. I'll say a bit more about them as they go up in turn. And we're going to start with Gareth Parks, who is a great proponent of collaboration and empowering people to solve problems, also finding innovative solutions. Gareth moved to Sir Robert McAlpine from the Energy Institute, where he set up their knowledge and digital teams, and part of his current role is overseeing the regular Project Hack events. I hope we'll hear more about that, where teams use data to find new ways of doing things better. By background, a chemical engineer and also economics and policy from UCL.
Super.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you very much, Sarah.
Over to you, Gareth.
So, I guess first off, the construction sector knows it needs to change. There's a huge amount of challenges within it, skills, productivity. There's a laundry list of things that need to change. Within that, there's also the government's targets around for construction and the construction sector, their strategy, setting out 33% cost decreases and 50% quicker projects by the middle of the next decade. So there's all sorts of challenges and gauntlets that have been laid down to the construction sector to find new ways of working. We think that when it comes to data, there's a massive opportunity, and what we want to do is to see what we can do here and through some of the work that we're doing around data trusts to unlock a lot of the transformation and the opportunity that's sitting there, ready for us to take advantage of. Construction is by its very nature, it's project-based and it's collaborative on those projects. People have got to come together, they've got to find ways of getting the job done. It's very much about everyone mucking in for the team. It's not necessarily always seen like that and perceived like that, and there's lots of opportunities for us to improve. But fundamentally, the challenge there is how do we find a way of collaborating when it comes to our data and the data sets that we're using on projects to make sure that we're capturing it once and in the right way rather than several times and in the wrong way. So that the opportunities, the futures is right there. It's happening all around us. There are already examples of these data trusts that are cropping up in other sectors, and I'm sure we can explore those in a bit more detail. Yeah, that sort of future, the cost of data storage is cheap. ICT and technology means that we can get real-time monitoring, we can get real-time control of assets. Kids are being taught how to program and how to code in schools, so it's really ripe for us to do something different and make a change. In terms of clients and the client base, they will and they should expect that the data that they've got available to them and their supply chain is used to leverage the learning and to take advantage of the learning legacies that some of the larger infrastructure projects are starting to put together. But certainly what I contend is that those learning legacies need to be more than about case studies and lessons learned. It needs to be about the interconnected data sets that we've got that we can transfer from one project to another and that we can find ways of leveraging. Because ultimately, if we're building a new school or a new hospital or a new piece of infrastructure, then surely it should be the case that the best one is the next one that we're about to build, because it's able to learn from all of the other ones that have gone before. And at the moment, we're not able to say that. We're not able to put forward an offer that enables that to happen. And really, that's why we're interested in these data trusts. This data trust idea is that it starts to provide that opportunity, that enablement to make a lot of these things happen. This journey that we've been on is a combination of the work that we've been doing internally, as well as the work that we've been doing with Martin and Projecting Success, particularly around the meetups, around the hackathons. More than happy to talk in more detail about some of the things that we've been doing there. But when we started, it was a community of 250 people. There's now up to more than 4,000. There are five different cities that there are regular events that are taking place in. The hackathons are getting more and more challenging in terms of the sorts of things that we're able to put into those. And what that meant was that we were able to share some of our data in a way that was fairly risk-free for us. And it got us thinking then about this next, what's next? How can we start to move things on to the next level? And that's really where these data trusts come in. And so Martin's going to give more detail in terms of some of the mechanics and the detail on the concept. So I won't dwell on that too much, other than to say Sir Robert McAlpine are really up for trying to make this happen. We're really keen to work through some of these initial challenges. We met with other contractors, other organisations earlier in this week, and in fact I was in this very room last week talking to other contractors about this concept and about how we can start to explore it in more detail. And the response that we've got has been brilliant. It's been there have been lots and lots of organisations that are coming to us and want to get involved and help make this happen. But a data trust isn't going to work with one organisation putting forward its data. We are starting the conversation, but we're going to have to. We know that this is about getting as many people as possible engaged and involved, and sharing as wide a data set as possible to start to really kind of deliver some of the impacts that we expect to see. Steve's going to talk in a bit more detail about some of the health and safety opportunities and impacts. And we think that they're legion. There are so many different opportunities once we start to, as Sarah said, to leverage those data sets and be able to harness the machine learning and artificial opportunities that exist that only come once you've got that scale and that level of data available. As well as health and safety, we think that there's a level of obligation, moral obligation, for us to start thinking about how we can share sustainability data. quality data. If the government has a strategy around productivity, then how do we start to, as a sector, come together and identify the opportunities that allow us to improve our common understanding of good practice, that allow us to find ways of enhancing that productivity. So, yeah, with that, I'll finish up for now. More than happy to answer questions about some of our own internal journey that we're on, as well as where we've got to. But I'd just say thank you all very much for coming and participating, and yeah, really look forward to hearing your questions. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Gareth. And so, Martin, I'll hand over to you. Martin's got 30 years experience of delivering projects, including a or $1 billion nuclear project. He's on a mission, I think, to change how projects are delivered, and keen to leverage the learning that comes from major projects to be transferred for future projects. He founded the project data analytics community just under 2 years ago, which, as we've heard now, has expanded to 4,000 members. And he's very keen on this conversation around data trusts, has established an apprenticeship to help build capacity, and is working at the leading edge of project data analytics.
Okay, superb. Thank you, Sarah. In terms of project data analytics, it's been a big part of my life for the last 4 years or so. So I started off looking into this concept of lessons learned, and it's something which I've always struggled with. It's never quite worked for me, and it's not worked for a lot of my peers. We seem to be making the same mistakes on the same projects. Projects are late time and time again. There's loads of stats on it. So I pulled together 20,000 lessons learned from various places across government and across the private sector, and it's not working. It's not working at all. So I then looked into the learning legacy, and I thought, the learning legacy's got some attributes to it. But in terms of those learning legacies, the Olympics learning legacy is an abstraction of what went on. It's not the full detail of what went on. So if you want to build a road again, there's a schedule for the road, there's a bill of materials, there's a resourcing plan, there's the impact of weather. All of that is part of your data set. It's not in an abstraction, which is a learning legacy document. It's in the raw data set. So where we need to get to is start to extract that data set and do something with it. It's an exhaust plume at the moment, and that exhaust plume goes in the dustbin mainly. We don't leverage it from one project into the next. I think that is what the real learning legacy is finding value from that exhaust plume. And there's a great blog which is published today, or a post on LinkedIn by Bent Fluvier. Bent said, we need to challenge the associations about every project is unique, right? And it's starting to get a lot of traction. And every project is different, but functionally they've got a lot of similarity. And what we don't do is leverage that data in terms of that similarities. And those similarities have got patterns, they've got patterns in the data. And in terms of picking those patterns out, it can be quite challenging. If you've got a machine, then they can do it a lot better. And it's not just the patterns in one set of data, it's the connections between that data. And once you've got connections, you need less overall data volumes. So it starts to become viable in the world of project management. So what we need to do is start to pull this data, so we've got the appropriate volume of data to solve the problem. And it's got to be done securely, because some of this data is embarrassing. There's projects which are very, very late. Some decisions have been made which might be sensitive, they might be legally challenged. There might be things in there which are very commercially sensitive as well. So it needs to be securely partitioned. And we can do that through an architecture associated with a graph database, where we can permission data down to a individual component level. And that starts to get really exciting, because you can give access then to other people. It might be a university, it might be a startup, and they can access data based upon a certain set of rules. And the rules are, you don't go and sell it to the Sunday Times and embarrass various organisations. It's got to be done professionally, so we can start to leverage that data and get something from it. And it's the trustees then. The trustees would be representatives of the data providers, and it's their job is to make sure that that data is appropriately stewarded. So it's being used for the right purposes, and they've got a right of veto. If it's their data, then they can say what that data is going to be used for. And it's not going to be used inappropriately. So right at the ground of this is trustworthiness. If it's not trustworthy, it won't develop. It's got to be a trustworthy enterprise, and that trustworthiness needs to be earned. It can't be demanded. So we've got to start off small and build out. And the concept at the moment is to start off with health and safety data and start to iterate up. And in terms of the data, I've had people say to me, we can't have my data, Martin, because it's all rubbish, and there's no point putting it into a trust, so I'm not going to play. And my response to that is, if you're a project manager and you're making decisions on a big job, multi-million pounds or £1 billion job, and your data is rubbish, why are you there? You're making decisions on poor data which are ill-informed. And once we start to get into this and we start to get the data quality up, it becomes a forensic footprint. If you're making decisions which are ill-informed, then it starts to become getting into a professional incompetence. And we need to change as a profession. We need to start to leverage this data, because a lot of it is public money as well in terms of these investments. We need to change the way that we are taking this learning legacy from one project to the next. And exactly what Gareth says is we need to build on it so the next project is better than this one. So it's aligning to the problems that we're trying to solve. We've then got to improve the data, and we've got to automate the data. In terms of the automation of data, once we start to apply some of these techniques, we can lift the data quality up, because it starts to triangulate across the data set, and it starts to give us better and better insights from that data. So once we start to join these data sets together and look for correlations, that's when the magic starts to happen. So it's not just pulling out silos of data and sticking them into this massive database. It's looking at the connections between the data as well. So once we've got that, we can start to refine, we can start to predict and reduce timescales. We start to free up a lot of resource as well. So all those dual jobs that we're all doing in project delivery at the moment, we can stop doing them, and we can use that resource then to get really good at guessing what's going to go wrong next. And we start to become predictive, and we start to say, this is where the risk budget needs to be invested. It's a completely different job. It's a really interesting job. And for me, if this happened at the start of my career, I'd be really excited. But it's a threat, and we need to respond to it. And if you don't respond, you don't engage in this, you'll be taken over by bright young things who just can be all over it. So I think it's going to be a transformational capability. The data trust is just one part of it. We talk about an ecosystem where people are getting hands-on experience, they start to think about it, they become enlightened by it, they understand the art of the possible. This is really transformational. And I'm really plugged into this, and I can't see what this looks like in 10 years' time. It's emergent, and it's going to be hugely exciting. So it's that forensic footprint that we start to leave behind us, and we can start to leverage. So I think all of that collectively is a great journey in front of us. We should grasp it with both hands and deliver it. Thank you.
Thanks very much. And Stephen, so Health and Safety Executive perspective, you're also Associate Director and Technical Lead on their Discovering Safety Programme, which is a £10 million global programme of work supported by the Lloyd's Register Foundation, who do great things. And I think at the heart of this, there's a sort of whole international health and safety knowledge resource being developed using operational data, but also industry data as well. So maybe you can tell us something about that and the perspective from health and safety.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. Yeah, I mean, I'm coming at this from the health and safety perspective. I mean, as a data scientist in HSE, I'm tasked with using HSE's data sources intelligently to inform health and safety practice. So we're all about actually generating lessons learned and passing them on to industry. But we recognise that probably a more effective way of doing this is to give industry access to the data sources that we use as data scientists. So we're really bought into the idea of making our data resources more outward facing, so that can actually happen. You know, we have limited resource to be able to exploit these data sets ourselves, and there's some like fantastic companies out there that can do fantastic things with all different data sets. we feel, I mean, a lot of the data sets that we hold as an organisation are in free text formats, and our view is that text mining and natural language processing tools are going to be an essential part of actually certainly exploiting the data sets that we hold. So we're really enthusiastic about working with organisations to do that. Just to give you an idea of the amount of data that HSE generates as an organisation, I mean, it receives information on about 70 to 80,000 accidents that are reported by duty holders through the video reporting scheme. It carries out approximately 20 to 30,000 inspections on an annual basis. So inspectors going out to workplaces and seeing how health and safety is practiced and how risks are actually mitigated in workplaces, and that's documented and digitised. And we carry out about 5,000 or 6,000 detailed incident investigations a year as well, and that generates hugely valuable learning relating to the root causes of why serious failures occur in workplaces from a health and safety perspective. And if you flip those root causes on their head, useful lessons learned as to how to prevent those accidents when they happen. So, but we know ourselves that we probably underexploit those data sets. So we're really keen, as I said, to better exploit them. We also recognise that HSE's data is the tip of the data iceberg, if you like. Organisations are generating huge amounts of comparable data on near misses, on how operations are actually undertook in different workplaces and what the health and safety implications are of those. And we feel for us to be able to get the most out of our data, it's really essential that we can actually bring industry data and regulatory data together. We feel we can do far more. Our inspectors are going out to workplaces, perhaps on an annual basis, and that they're getting just a snapshot in time of how things are done. For us to be able to actually start being more proactive with the way health and safety is actually carried out and predict endpoints, we need that fine granular information, but we want to actually bring the two data sets together. It's very much a case of how operations undertook in workplaces and what potentially are the risks associated with them, and then the mitigations that are relevant. So as Sarah mentioned, HSE recently started a large international programme of work funded by Lloyd's Register Foundation. They, like us, know the potential to do things so much better from a health and safety perspective. Construction is very much one of those sectors where we feel there are major gains. I think one of the common measures of health and safety performance across any sectors really is looking at fatality rates. And if we look at those over the last 20 or 30 years, we've made some great progress, and fatality rates have come down significantly if we look at the way things were 20, 30 years ago. But if you look at the last 5 years, and not just construction, but other sectors also, fatality rates have tended to plateau, and organisations are really keen to be able to demonstrate continuous improvements in performance, including health and safety performance. And we feel that one of the ways in which we can perhaps break through those performance plateaus is through better application and better use of data. So that's really at the heart of our own research programme. I don't think it's a coincidence that when we're having conversations, we hear about all these ideas about similar initiatives, springing up. It's not a coincidence, but we feel that actually, it's a really good idea and opportunity to bring some of this discussion and thinking together and actually start making it happen. Let's do something tangible. So that's what we're all about, and happy to answer a few more questions over the course of the evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So now it's your chance to ask questions or share thoughts and ideas or experiences here, or those joining us remotely. Okay, so while you're thinking about questions, has anyone got one? Yes.
I am in complete support with what you're doing, but, and there's always a but, isn't there? when we look back on what makes projects successful, so I think in basis what you're saying, let's take this plume of data and let's learn from it for the next time. Speaking both as having done it and also as an academic, a vast amount of what makes a project successful is not captured in the hard data. It's captured in the network of relationships that support that. So explicit data might tell one story and implicit data might tell another. What is the approach, do you think, that's needed to capture that very difficult tacit data about who trusted whom, about how good relationships were? Because surely it must be really important to do that as well if we're really going to be able to be predictive in project success.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm sorry.
Gareth, I was going to ask you.
Okay. So I'm dying to answer this. So I completely agree. It's not the stuff that you write down that, I mean, it's the 90% of other stuff that isn't written or that is a lot less tangible. The thing is that you can use things like sentiment analysis to start to pull out some trends within just what people have written as to tell really whether or not they've said something and mean something completely different. So you can already start to get some idea from that. In terms of where we are at the moment, we're way down in the basement. We've got a really long way to go in order to really be able to leverage a lot of the things that in terms of that. But there are tools out there that enable you to start to ask a couple of questions at the end of a meeting to see whether or not you did trust everybody that was in the room with you, and give people feedback 24 hours later as to how they performed in that meeting compared to everybody else. And there's all sorts of really exciting things that you can tap into. The trouble is that in order for us to get into that and that level of, I mean, that's really that's cutting edge, really advanced type stuff. We have got a whole wealth of other data to work towards, and it's not so much about the data itself, it's about the confidence and the ability and the awareness and the people that we bring on this journey.
If I kind of might follow that up, immediately you can see very simple ways you can see whether interactions happen, because you can just count numbers of stuff,
exactly.
numbers of emails and all the rest of it. I think why it's important for you to think about now, though, is because you're setting up the legal framework for a data sharing exercise. But I mean, I think that there are all sorts of then perhaps ethical and trust issues that are involved in that as well. And I think that is going to take more effort than anything that's involved with a kind of legal aspect of that.
Completely agree. I mean, the ethical challenges around AI are mind-boggling. I mean, it's a field as big as this. It's massive.
But it doesn't mean don't do it, because I've tried it a bit and it will be wonderful. Please do.
And I think the thing is that we need to go into this conversation knowing and being aware of and being proactive about it, rather than sort of sleepwalking into some of those challenges. And I think what we want to do is to start the conversation to move things forward, and then go from there.
Stephen's
just to add something, I don't think it's about automating decision making. I think it's about supporting decision making, and it's the challenge is about actually making useful intelligence accessible to those that can then make use of it. I think that's it. If you speak to a lot of organisations, I think the big challenge that they face is actually generating actionable insights and communicating that in an effective way to those that are actually making the specialists that are making the decisions. So it's not just about gut feel and intuition and expertise. It's that, and that's important, but it's that in parallel with good, robust, hard evidence that's easily accessible, and the decision is more informed as a result. That's for me what it's about.
There's a great point as well, Naomi, in terms of that data set, right? Because at the moment the data set's not there for what you're talking about, but it's starting to get there. So what we need to do in terms of the community is to say, what are those problem statements that we're trying to answer? What's the use cases that we're trying to satisfy? Once we start to understand that, then we can start to map all of that data set against those use cases. And there's a chap called Kelvin McGrath, and he came to our meetup. He flew over from Australia last November, and he gave a great talk. And Kelvin McGrath is starting to solve this problem. Right, so he's starting to use connected data associated with what people think of each other at the end of a meeting, what the sentiments are. So he's doing a survey, for instance, on the board report and saying, so this is what the board thinks of the project, and they all think it's going great. And we'll ask the engineers what they think, and it's a completely different answer. So there's a disconnect then, you can start to look at the narrative, etc. He's doing some really cool stuff, and that's starting to create a data plume, which he can then connect with other things.
And my
So
point
it's starting to get there.
is no more than there are going to be some data plumes which people are very happy to share, and some which they are definitely not. And some of the most interesting data plumes are those which people are least likely to want to share. And that's something that we need, as anybody who's interested in doing this, needs to think about right from the start.
I would say as well, though, it's not sharing. I think sharing's it's the wrong word in this context. It's about pooling data, because sharing data means everyone can access it, right? It's about pooling data. And if that pooling of data means it gets anonymized, it gets pseudonymized, it gets aggregated, it means that we can then start to get the insights out of it. So I think sharing, we need to be careful of that word. I think it's pooling within an agreed set of rules.
It's interesting. I mean, if I can contribute here, it goes back to this whole conversation about what is your agreed purpose between the stakeholders coming together. And if you have everyone coming together around an agreed purpose that then involves the considerations for the providers and the users, what data we're talking about, where there's trust around that data, who's going to steward it, then you start with specific use cases, and then you can build out generating trust as you go. I'm chairing, so I shouldn't be answering questions. Yes, the gentleman here.
So in terms of the granularity of data, to what level do you think we need to get this granularity to be able to provide some form of analytics associated with multi-point minor failures? So it's almost like a trigger action. So if you think of dominoes or a Swiss cheese effect, if you think of layers, on many occasions there is something that will mean that things will not fail. But there are the occasions whereby everything's lined up, all the stars are lined up, it's going to be a massive failure. To what extent do we need that data in terms of providing that level of input in terms of the analysis? So lots of little things happening which causes failure. You can see the big things happening, they get reported. What about the little things? And that also applies to health, safety and well-being.
Yeah, major acts, yeah.
Stephen, do you want to?
Yeah, I mean, I think from my perspective, I'm less interested in the specifics of what happens, say, at a work site level. What interests me is the context in which certain things happen, and actually building up a pool of information on those. So it's less the specifics about one situation. One of the concerns that's raised with a lot of organisations when they're saying, we can see the value in what you're trying to do, but for us to be able to support it, we're having to, release information that we're not prepared to release. For us, actually desensitising and removing the specifics and just leaving behind the learning, the context is, from a health and safety point of view, that's all we need really.
As an example, our reportable is down to 0.03%. For our consultants, it's down to 0.05%. However, what we've started to do is to say, okay, what is happening in terms of reportables of near misses, of the things that could potentially lead to accidents happening? And it's getting that culture across, particularly when what we have discovered is the converse, that people are not open, honest, and like to cover things up so that people don't see that things have gone wrong, that things are right by the time people actually get to the point of inspecting it.
Yeah, I think certainly for a lot of data analytics, you need to be able to characterise through the data what normal looks like. You need to baseline this, is normal. and that's the issue that we have as a regulator. We just have snapshots of abnormal. So in answer to your question, I think we need sufficient information that allows us to baseline the normal, so we can actually use some of these data analytic tools to actually look at relationships between, well, when does the abnormal happen? What is the characteristics of the operations that is associated most with those abnormal things happening?
And sorry to ambush you or take the meat, but what is normal?
Normal for us is risks controlled and maybe not zero harm. There's a lot of debate around, is normal, no health and safety incidents, but it's, as low as is practical.
I think as well it's about feature engineering. So in data science terms, you're trying to find out those differentiators. So it's those things that's going to trigger something, it's going to snowball something, etc. Now if you've got 40 projects, it's quite hard to do that feature engineering because you've not got the volume of data. If you've got 50,000 projects, you can start to get there. So those features, so I worked on a nuclear site and we got a big safety culture there, so you've got to write down every time somebody's going along with the shoelaces undone or walking down the stairs and not holding onto the handrail, because it was very much a safety culture. Now a lot of that is not necessarily going to be an indicator, but some of it will be. And once you start to correlate it, then you'll get patterns start to come out of that data. So I would say this is going to be emergent. It's going to take time to get there, but we'll start to find these features which are differentiating. Now, individually, you're going to need a massive set of data, but if you can start to connect the data, then data volumes can start to drop down. And you can start to use advanced techniques as well to even reduce that data volume further. And that's where we can work together, because we can start to apply those advanced techniques and start to try some clever things with data analytics.
Can I ask a question while other people are thinking of them? So there have been a lot of reports coming out in the infrastructure sector as well as elsewhere, talking about the potential around data sharing. There was one quite recently. And there are any number of bodies, the Centre for Digital Built Britain, the DGFT and the DT, whatever it is, dozens at IPA and so on. And so I'm just wondering to what extent you're engaging in these early conversations about engaging them to help them convene the industry as well as your great efforts.
Yes.
So that it looks like you've got a groundswell led by some of these bodies as well.
Yes, absolutely. So, in fact, the Data Trust is a concept that's on the roadmap for the Centre for Digital Built Britain. We've spoken to them and they're on board with us bringing that forward effectively, and recognise the role that has to play in enabling lots and lots of other things. The Open Data Institute were with us earlier in the week. We've had lots of really positive conversations with them. I was with one of our clients this afternoon talking to them about it, who are interested. There's a whole raft of other organisations that are, from a contractor perspective, that are interested in working with us. And at the moment, it is just exploratory. We think that there's something for us to do here. We've got a set of mechanisms that are going to help us get there, and we're now ready. We're certainly in a position to put some data forward. We've got a number of other organisations that are keen to do that, and then the sort of supporting organisations that are around the edges. There are numerous organisations that we've been talking to about it. I think our next step is to secure a level of funding through Innovate UK to sort of take things forward, or any other route, and then as we're going, we're bringing on more and more partners.
Which is great, because we've talked earlier about the absolute criticality of effective stakeholder engagement. So there's this fine line, isn't there, between those of you who've got the energy and enthusiasm to get the conversation going, and yet the need to bring your equivalent stakeholders along with you, rather than them thinking, not invented here, it wasn't me that was leading the way. So how are you going to go about that with your
and we're
group?
Categorically, we've not invented anything. All we're doing is starting the conversation. That it's lots and lots of other organisations that are, and the Open Data Institute the Government Office of AI. There are numerous sort of organisations that have done some really great thinking in this space. And then, and we've been working really closely with Martin, who's been doing some really fantastic work to take the concept further and to take it to industry. There's an opportunity that Martin can talk about in terms of oil and gas and the linkages between the two different sectors. So we very much have just said we think this is something that we can collectively talk about. Yeah.
Which is to be applauded. Do you want to say something about the oil and gas?
In terms of oil and gas, so
Industry
this is where it
activities.
started from for me. So I did some work with them in January, February of this year, and that went on until about May time, and that's working up the rules and the principles and the technical architecture and the risk assessment and security, all that sort of stuff associated with a data trust. And then we've been working with Sullivan McAlpine since then to put some more pixels around that. I think it's for me, we've had some really great engagement. So we've got people like CDBB who's pushing this now. You know, we've got the ODI who's at the back of it. What's disappointing for me personally, I'm ex-government, I had 20 years in government, and government has got the most to benefit from this. And they've got a moral responsibility, they've got a public responsibility to leverage all of this learning legacy from one project to the next. Now, I've spent a few years and I've upset a few people in government trying to get my hands on that data, and I couldn't do it, so I went through the freedom of information request, etc. And now I'm going to tribunal trying to get some of that information. I insist on it. It's a public right that some of this data, it's our data, which will tell us about mistakes on future projects. We've got a public obligation to do it, and I'm going to fight tooth and nail until that happens. At the moment, we've not managed to engage the Infrastructure Projects Authority, and I can't quite work out why, because they've got a lot to gain from it. And if I was in government saying this, and I saw industry all working together pushing this forward, I'd try and get on board that bus, you know, and put my shoulder behind it and get it going. In terms of government departments as well, you know, you've got loads of data, but it's not that critical data. You know, there's parts of government who think that they're sat on this gold mine of data. Most of this artificial intelligence benefit is coming from the supply chain, because that's where the work's actually executed. So what we need to do is work together end to end, from government all the way through the supply chain. We need to start to change this behaviour. This is coming, right? We're going to get information into this data trust, and we will fight tooth and nail to make it happen. We've got 4,000 people on board. We're going to have 10,000 by the end of next year. We're going to get a movement going. This will happen. Now, if you work with us, you can shape it. If not, it's going to happen.
So, okay, so let's just think about the health and safety environment. So you've got a regulatory backdrop, so data has to be shared in some respects. And do you think that can help generate industry's willingness to engage and find ways to, and I say share in not by meaning open, but I mean in its broadest sense. Do you think that helps? Are there examples that you can think of where it might be easiest to?
Yeah, I mean, I think focusing on the data is perhaps less value certainly for the health and safety executive, and I like to focus more on the learning. And you know, we know that there are certain sectors and certain health and safety regulations that state that you need to demonstrate that you're learning lessons from things that have happened in other organisations. And you know, a key challenge that organisations face is how do they actually do that? How can they demonstrate that they are learning lessons? So we kind of feel that actually, yeah, I mean, the regulator does have an obligation and a role in actually facilitating that. And we feel that actually one of the ways that we can facilitate it is to support the creation of repositories of information that allow lessons to be learned. So I'm less in favour of mandating you must share data, because I think it needs to be something that's open and voluntary. I think that the key thing is demonstrating the benefit of the initiatives, that you have something to gain from pooling your data with other organisations' data, and we can help you to address some of your challenges and some of your responsibilities as a duty holder.
Yeah, so it's around finding the benefit for everyone taking part and the wider benefit for the sector itself. Yeah.
Could I build on that as well in terms of the Oil and Gas Authority? So they're looking at this at the moment, and there's something called the MER rules, which is about maximising economic recovery from the North Sea. So it's getting the most out you can out of from the North Sea because it brings in a lot of jobs and it brings a lot of tax dollars, right? So if you're working in the North Sea, you've got to sign up to the MER rules. So you've got an obligation to deliver your projects on time, really, because if they're not on time and they start to go over budget, they become uninvestable in the future. If they're uninvestable, you can't then extract those assets from the North Sea. So it's in everybody's interest to start to work together, to start to pool that expertise and to make projects cheaper, quicker, and with increased delivery confidence. If they wanted to, the Oil and Gas Authority could mandate this next week. They've got the legal right to do that. They don't want to do it because it's about taking people on a journey with them, right? It's about all of us working together to say, let's try and achieve this thing and let's sell it in terms of the end objective. But it needs a bit of vision from some people as well. And that's starting to build, and I see it now in the oil and gas sector, it is starting to build. There's some people who's coming out some conversations with them. And we are starting to move the dial. It's going to take time because there's a cultural thing associated with this. It needs to be trustworthy. If it's not trustworthy, we start to give data to the wrong people for the wrong reasons, we start to do harm with it, this will fail. We need to start small and build up.
Okay.
Sorry, can I ask a quick
Yes,
question?
please.
It's very good hearing you guys on how you're sharing data. What's been your biggest challenge so far? I mean, I can name few. I'm not from construction industry, so I can definitely work out few challenges here. But what do you think is your biggest challenge in getting across this message to everybody and getting some valuable data for your purposes and everybody else's?
Trustworthiness, I think.
Yeah.
That's the main thing. If we pick this data up and we do bad things with it, this will collapse overnight, right? So it needs to be trustworthy. Nobody's going to turn up with the profit data on day one. They might do it in year 5 if we can then give them some feedback that doubles their profit, right? That'd be cool. Everybody's going to do it. They won't do it on day one. They will start with health and safety data, and it's not just about incident data. It's all about safety observations. It's about near misses, etc.
I mean, I think from my perspective, GDPR and privacy has, has made it a challenge to actually sell the idea of be open with your data. But I don't think it's a barrier that's unsurmountable at all. I think what it means is that we need to actually, build into the process of creating data trusts mechanisms to mitigate the risks. We need to remove the sensitive information, focus just on what is needed to generate the learning and to improve how things are done. Remove mentions of names, companies. I mean, as I said, from our perspective, that is less important than the context and the learning.
So in parts you answered my second question, Praveen, that what are you doing to actually enable the organizations and build trust with them to share the data? And you're talking about anonymized data to be shared, but it has to be something has to be in for organizations to share the data with you in the first place, and you have to place value on it. So what would you give the organizations on the day one, right, in return for that anonymized data, and how do you publish it is one of the things that I think probably makes a better value case in terms of getting the data from them, and also assuring that, hey, you share this data with us, we're not going to misuse it in any way. And how do you actually make sure in your process that nobody can pinpoint a mishap that happened to our organization? I think that's the biggest thing in here. Right?
So that's the purpose of the data steward. So the data steward's job, so we've got some tools, for instance, where we can take GDPR data, we put it through a sausage machine, and it's spat out as clean data, right? So we take all the names out, company names, etc., and it's cleaned up automatically. And we put a little error check on the back of that in terms of the human eye just to make sure it's been done properly. But we can do that now. So that's the first step in the process. But in terms of the return on the investment, right? So I've been in meetings when somebody said, so what do I get paid for my data? And if I give you some data because you're a contractor and you're going to go and steal my data and then I make millions off it and sell apps and things like that. Now, it's about that return on investment. It's about improving construction productivity. It's about doing things safer, etc. Now, some of this is a belief in the future return, right? We can't write the business case today that says, off the back of this, we're going to save 1.6% on total margins, right? We can't say that today because the evidence is not in place. But what we know from aligned industries is there's a lot of benefit from doing this, and we can start to implement this. We can get the evidence will start to accrue. Once we get that evidence at a community scale, we write papers, and then that will then get the word out there, builds the evidence base.
I think for me, I think the benefits need to be more clearly defined from the outset. For me, it's not, the data trust isn't the starting point. It's not give us your data and then we'll be able to do clever things with it. The starting point for us and for our own research program was the industry use cases. We spoke to industry at the very outset of our work, and they told us these are the things, these are the challenges that we're facing at the moment, where more intelligent use of data, we feel, can help us, and we don't have the expertise to do it. So it's not just the data, it's the development of the tools and techniques and making those available for organisations to then use on the data trust itself or on their own data. But it has to be based on a material benefit that an organisation is looking to actually address for me.
And I think we're out of time. So just to wrap up, I'd say that this is a huge opportunity for the sector to come together. This isn't about a solution being imposed on the sector. This will only work if the stakeholders come together and agree the right approach and how they want to go about it. So on that note, do we think there is scope for greater use of data in the sector? I think yes. Hope that you're all in favour of that. Well, thank you all very, very much for coming this evening and engaging in the conversation. It's the beginning of a conversation. There's many more to be held amongst stakeholders around the sector, but all conversations contribute to the cause. So thank you very much to the panellists here this evening, Gareth, Martin and Stephen. Thank you very much. Can we show our appreciation?